Hey guys, today I'll show you a vampire horror thriller TV series named Van Helsing, Season 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Previously on Season 1, Vanessa watched in horror as her daughter Dylan brutally killed the rebels. Vanessa slowly approached her daughter, continuously calling her name, hoping to awaken some semblance of reason within her. However, Mohammed, who was watching from the side, accidentally knocked over a wooden box. Startled, Dylan quickly pushed Vanessa away and ran to the next floor, which greatly angered Vanessa. She walked over and punched Mohammed, and then they both followed Dylan downstairs. Meanwhile, the lab doctor came looking for Dimitri and was shocked to find that Dimitri's wife, Rebecca, had already died. He tore off the emblem on his sleeve and returned to the lab, where he burned all his research journals. Just then, the salaryman also arrived at the scene. The doctor lied, claiming he too was a victim, forced to conduct cruel experiments here, and now he was terrified. Seeing the dark circles under the doctor's eyes, the salaryman believed the doctor's words and asked him to lead them to the power supply equipment. They reached a staircase where the doctor indicated that it led to the underground generator. When the two entered to check, the doctor quickly shut the door behind them, leaving them no choice but to go down and investigate. Meanwhile, in her frantic search for her daughter, Vanessa used her unbrushed teeth to bite Mohammed to enhance her senses, as only blood could help her concentrate. After consuming the blood, she quickly sensed her daughter's location. At the same time, the salaryman and his companion reached the power supply area and successfully detonated it. They then entered a room and noticed bloodstains on the floor. The salaryman suspected that the vampire king Dimitri might not be dead. Following the blood trail, he found a bookshelf, and after moving it, a secret underground passage was revealed. Without a second thought, he proceeded down the passage. The few remaining outside exchanged glances and followed suit, unaware of the blood-soaked feast that awaited them ahead. Several rebels nervously entered the underground passage, and a striking woman had been waiting for them for quite some time. The anxious men immediately chased after her, but in the next second, the elevator doors closed and they were crushed into a pulp. In a corner, the doctor found Dylan hiding. After telling her that there would be no experiments today, he pulled out a bag of blood from his bag, which Dylan greedily drank. Meanwhile, Julius, the vampire leader of another faction, received news that the vampire headquarters had been breached and Dimitri was severely injured. Now was the perfect time to avenge their strategist. Thus, he decided to take on the task of killing Dimitri alone. At the same time, Vanessa also located her daughter through her senses, but found her controlled by the doctor. She rushed over, only to be blocked by an iron gate. Vanessa banged furiously on the iron gate, her anger clearly showing as the gate bent under her blows. Mohammed, unable to bear it, told Vanessa about another route they could take. Just as the doctor was about to escape with Dylan, Vanessa confronted him at the exit. The doctor used Dylan's life as a bargaining chip to demand his own release. He revealed that he had been experimenting on Dylan for the past 3 years, altering her genetic sequence. Even if Vanessa wanted to reverse Dylan's condition, turning her back into a human was impossible. She could only survive by staying with him. Suddenly, Dylan bit the doctor and then ran to the wall to continue drinking from the blood bag. As the doctor fell to the ground, he sensed his body undergoing some transformation, but before he could finish speaking, Vanessa shot him several times, treating him to a free lunch of bullets. As he lay dying, the doctor warned Vanessa that biting Dylan would kill her instantly. Blood slowly flowed, eventually pooling together. A head emerged from the blood pool. It was Dimitri's sexy mistress, who confidently stripped off her clothes to flex her figure shamelessly and stepped into the sticky blood pool. She then assured Dimitri that Vanessa could never escape her grasp. By evening, the rebels were retreating in large numbers, and the rebel leader's mission to kill Dimitri had utterly failed, setting the stage for a fierce vampire counterattack. A rebel girl, Jolene, suggested that they should leave for the last sanctuary in Denver as soon as possible. However, with many wounded, they were unable to leave and had to take things one step at a time. The man pulled back the curtain to check on the wounded, only to find that the treating doctor was Doc, who had disappeared for a while and had been there a long time, treating their injured soldiers. Still haunted by her experience of abandoning and framing Axel, she had not fully recovered. Suddenly, a survivor was brought in. Doc walked over and recognized her as the little girl from the hospital. Since their departure from the hospital, they had quickly been attacked by vampires, and everyone had scattered, with only the little girl surviving. Doc and the little girl agreed not to mention their past at the hospital here, as they could not trust anyone in this place. On the other side, Vanessa, with Dylan in tow and guided by Muhammad, finally emerged outside after passing through a mountainous pile of corpses. However, Dylan hadn't fed on blood for a long time and was beginning to weaken. Suddenly, the loud cries of vampires filled the air around them. It turned out that Dimitri's mistress and her followers had completely surrounded them. Upon seeing her, Dylan instinctively wanted to run towards her for a mommy hug, but Vanessa wasn't about to let her daughter fall back into darkness again. To make up for his mistake, Muhammad urged Vanessa to take Dylan and escape while he stayed behind to cover their retreat. After a burst of gunfire, Muhammad successfully held off the vampires, but soon ran out of bullets and was wounded, collapsing to the ground. He knew what fate awaited him. Just as the mistress was about to give Muhammad a tooth massage, a dagger pierced through her head. A mysterious, fully armed figure arrived to flex his hoodie and held a knife to Muhammad's neck. Muhammad asked who he was before passing out. Later at night, when the salaryman and his companion were patrolling, they stumbled upon the injured Muhammad. Muhammad informed the salaryman that Vanessa had escaped safely, but a mysterious person was searching for her. He wasn't sure if this person was friend or foe. Although Muhammad felt like giving up, the salaryman insisted on taking him back. On the pitch-black night, the little girl walked alone in the woods. After crossing the muddy ground, she arrived at a cave and placed several bags of blood at the entrance. Inside, there were fierce growls. While Doc and Jolene were on guard duty, the little girl returned from outside with 2 rabbits. Jolene felt deeply for the little girl, but Doc remained cautious. The next evening, Doc followed the little girl back to the woods. After she placed the blood bags at the cave entrance, Doc jumped out and grabbed her, demanding to know why she was doing this. Then, a figure emerged from the cave. It was the long-missing Axel, who had transformed into a vampire. When enemies meet, the emotions run high. Axel chased Doc for several blocks and pinned her sexy body down to the ground. Just when everyone thought Axel would bite her using his unbrushed teeth, Doc desperately pleaded for her shitty life, claiming she wasn't ready to die, and mentioned that there were many rebels nearby to scare Axel away. Axel ordered her to return, bring all the blood bags from the hospital, and help him find Vanessa. Clearly, despite becoming a vampire, Axel still retained his consciousness and resisted his bloodthirsty instincts. After returning to the hospital, Doc was torn, but eventually took out the blood bags, only to be caught by Jolene. Upon learning that Doc intended to feed a vampire, Jolene drew her gun and urged her to reconsider. However, after a persuasive argument from Doc, Jolene was eventually convinced. When Vanessa woke up, she saw her daughter basking in the sunlight outside, a rare sight for a vampire unafraid of the sun. Seizing the opportunity, Vanessa tried to appeal to her emotions to awaken her memories. However, suddenly the cries of vampires were heard outside, and Dylan immediately wanted to run out. Vanessa grabbed her, but Dylan violently struck at her neck, making her bleed profusely. The scene shifts to Doc walking ahead with the blood bags, but she was firmly in the sights of a vampire. Terrified, Doc screamed for help in her chicken voice, but Axel just stood by, watching the unfolding drama with detachment. As Doc struggled with the vampire, she threw out a bag of blood and managed to escape in the commotion. Watching the vampire devour the blood bag infuriated Axel. It was his sustenance, and he wasn't about to let it go to waste. After killing the vampire, Axel greedily consumed the remaining blood. Despite Doc's pleas for him to conserve the blood, Axel ignored her bullshit. Meanwhile, Vanessa, who possessed self-healing abilities, quickly recovered from her injuries. Dylan followed the sounds and ventured outside, only to encounter the vampire leader Julius, who decided to take him to the vampire headquarters upon learning he was a product of Rebecca. Soon, Dylan's strength waned from lack of blood. Vanessa, catching up, declared Dylan her daughter, diminishing her usefulness to Julius, who then attempted to kill Dylan outright. Enraged, Vanessa charged at him, and after a fierce muscle wrestling, Julius pinned her down, declaring her no match for him. Vanessa retorted, mentioning she had disfigured Rebecca's face and threatened a worse fate for him before pulling out a gun and shooting him repeatedly. During their exchange, Dylan learned of Rebecca's death and, in anger, attacked Vanessa. After a struggle, Vanessa managed to restrain her daughter, but Julius kicked her heavy body away and began assaulting Dylan. Unable to contain her fury, Vanessa leapt onto Julius and bit him using her unbrushed teeth, causing him excruciating pain as he writhed and eventually vomited black blood, transforming back into a human. As a human again, Julius sought Vanessa's forgiveness for his past inhumane wrongdoings. Suddenly, Dylan began struggling to breathe. Julius explained that as a young vampire, prolonged absence of blood would lead to death. He offered his own blood, and witnessing her daughter's agony, Vanessa reluctantly agreed. However, Dylan spat out Julius's diabetic blood after a few sips, complaining it tasted as foul as rat droppings and was utterly undrinkable. This seemed to be an advantage of being transformed by Vanessa. Julius warned Vanessa that without blood, Dylan would die. But if Vanessa hunted humans for blood, she'd become a demon. If she refrained, she'd be condemning her own daughter. This dilemma plunged Vanessa into anguish. In a mysterious detention center somewhere, a group of people had captured a teenage girl, preparing to punish her. Meanwhile, on a nearby hillside, a figure wrapped from head to toe stood watching. It was the missing finger-collecting killer, Sam, declaring his glorious return. Just moments earlier, this unruly teenage gang was mercilessly whipping a timid boy. Due to his fear of killing vampires, he had been ostracized by everyone and had no choice but to endure silently. As they were about to leave, Sam appeared at the door. Despite their gunfire, their aim was poor. Sam pretended to be hit and fell. When a few of the teenagers came over to check, Sam suddenly stood up and unleashed a bloody slaughter on them. The frightened group retreated into a dead end, which was exactly Sam's plan. He locked the remaining people outside. The timid boy heard the screams outside just as he was about to climb out of the swimming pool. Looking up, he saw Sam standing above him, observing the wounds on his arms and the scars on his back. Sam knew the timid boy had not had an easy life here. Sam drew a pattern on his clothes resembling those often worn by Muhammad and embraced him, treating him as a substitute for Muhammad. When the timid boy opened the door, a young boy ran towards it, and Sam caught him from behind, hanging him in midair. Sam pierced his body with a wooden stick, greedily savoring the blood flowing from him. Sam handed the stick to the timid boy, signaling that he could do the same. As the timid boy hesitated, the hanging boy hurled insults at him. Unable to tolerate it any longer, the timid boy furiously stabbed him repeatedly. At the same time, Vanessa caught a mechanic in the wild and brought him to her daughter. She assured him that her daughter had a small appetite and definitely wouldn't drain him dry. Just as Vanessa was making a cut, the man suddenly shot at Dylan. Enraged, Vanessa swiftly slit his throat and threw him to her daughter for feeding. The man was quickly drained of blood. However, cries for help soon came from the man's car nearby. Vanessa, desperate to feed her daughter, had ruthlessly captured the man, but she regretted her actions when she learned that the man also had children. She asked Julius to take care of the children. By the time Julius returned, Dylan was almost gone, as the blood she had consumed was still insufficient for healing. Unable to hunt humans any longer, Vanessa decided to try reversing Dylan's condition, despite the unpredictable risks. She gently bit Dylan's hand, and she immediately quieted down, soon going silent. Just as Vanessa thought her daughter had died, Dylan suddenly sat up, vomited black blood, regained consciousness, and remembered Vanessa as her mother. At this moment, mother and daughter were finally reunited. Axel and Doc weren't so lucky this time. One was out of blood bags and the other had no food. Doc suggested that Axel drink some of her blood and then go catch some wild rabbits for her to eat, but Axel refused. He staggered to the car door, basking in the sunlight to keep himself calm, banging on the door as he was overwhelmed by hunger. After finding some nails nearby, he told Doc to always carry them, as they might come in handy. The next day, Vanessa, Dylan, and Julius were happily playing in the snow, marking the happiest day Vanessa had had in 3 years. Watching her daughter so lively and beautiful, Vanessa felt the world wasn't so dark after all. But as she approached her daughter with a snowball, Dylan showed abnormal signs. White smoke began to emanate from her, and as the sunlight scorched her, Dylan completely turned to ash. The doctor's prediction was right. He had indeed altered Dylan's genetic sequence. The loss devastated Vanessa, and her mournful roar was felt by all those she had turned, awakening an ancient vampire sleeping in an unknown place. The scene shifts to an unnamed juvenile detention center surrounded by bodies, where the psycho killer Sam was slowly singing a song while arranging his collection of human fingers. The timid boy was shivering with fear. Kind-hearted Sam had considerately dressed him. Sitting opposite the timid boy, Sam was trying to communicate something, gesturing in sign language, but the timid boy couldn't understand. Frustrated, Sam threw a chair out and suggested a game where the timid boy could use a stick to stab himself. When the timid boy tried to escape, Sam blocked him and reopened the door, scaring the others inside. Sam grabbed a young guy and whipped his arms in front of the timid boy, mirroring what had previously been done to the timid boy. It seems that this is Sam's way of avenging the timid boy. After the beating, Sam pulled out a dagger and killed the young guy, indulging in a feast. The timid boy was devastated. During the time Sam went to deal with the body, the timid boy managed to steal the keys and tried to open the main door, but the keys were wrong. When Sam caught up, the timid boy had no choice but to crawl into the ventilation duct. The timid boy made it to the roof outside, with Sam leisurely following him, even dancing in TikTok style as if it were all a game. Seizing the moment Sam was distracted, the timid boy jumped down, locking Sam in the playground, and went back to try the main door again. Just when he thought he could escape, Sam appeared behind him, took him to the restroom, and cut the timid boy's hair to match that of Mohammed. He demanded the timid boy admit his name was Mohammed, but the timid boy refused. The consequence was that Sam cruelly cut off his tongue. Turning to Axel and Doc, they were walking through the woods when Axel's bloodlust took over once again. He urged Doc to tie him up quickly or he would tear her smelly part to pieces. Once tied up, Axel completely lost his sense of reason. After Dylan burst into flames and turned to ash in her mother's arms, Vanessa began a frenzied retaliation against the vampires to vent her anger, wiping out every vampire within a 10 miles radius. Julius tried to reason with her, warning that this path could lead to trouble, but now in a state of madness, Vanessa didn't care much. Her immortality gave her boldness. Mentioning Dylan nearly got Julius killed by Vanessa, as her daughter was a permanent wound in her heart. They continued to hunt vampires in the forest and stumbled upon 2 skinned corpses hanging from a tree ahead. Julius warned her that the gruesome scene was the work of skin flayers and they needed to leave quickly. They hurried away but were soon tripped up by traps on the road. When Vanessa looked up, 3 skin flayers had already appeared before them. When they came to, the skin flayers had already started preparing dinner, first slicing into Julius's back and tasting his diabetic blood, which turned out to be disgustingly unpleasant. Vanessa began to mock them, prompting the lead skin flayer to turn towards her, tear her clothes, and slice a large chunk of flesh from her back. However, Vanessa's wound quickly healed. Suddenly, she saw a little boy appear and urged him to leave quickly, but he curiously approached the skin flayers, who soon spotted a new target. In fear, the boy turned and ran towards the distance. Vanessa struggled free of her bonds and, wielding a small hatchet, ran to rescue him. The boy suddenly stopped and stood still as an archer hidden in the trees began shooting arrows at the skin flayers. Vanessa dealt with the last one just as a group of survivors emerged from behind the trees. They took Vanessa and Julius to a camp established by someone, mostly populated by children trained as scouts to guard this sanctuary. While talking to a little boy, Vanessa noticed scars on his wrists and suspected what the camp owner had done to the children. The next day, Vanessa and the others went to trade with another group of survivors, but found no one on the other side of the bridge. Realizing something might have happened, Vanessa and Julius crossed the bridge to investigate, followed by the camp owner and the others. They arrived at a juvenile detention center where Vanessa found bodies everywhere, all missing a nose-picking finger, a familiar scene. Realizing who might be responsible for this massacre, she quickly sent Julius to tell the camp builder and the others to evacuate. She decided to confront the Twisted Sam herself. When the old enemies meet, they blaze with extra hatred. It was clear that Sam hadn't had his fill of fun here yet. He wanted to make a quick getaway. Vanessa hurled her hand axe, striking Sam squarely in the back. After retrieving the axe, Sam still managed to leave marks on the glass, pointing Vanessa in the direction he fled. Picking up the axe, she chased after him, following his psychopathic smell. She found herself in an indoor sports arena where Sam had already taken cover. Singing smugly, he tossed a ball her way. Sam then confessed to Vanessa that he had been playing all along, lying to Axel to kill the survivors and framing the flirty man, leading Vanessa to kill him, and finally he had killed her friend Susan himself. This revelation completely enraged Vanessa. Just then, the camp owner walked in. Sam immediately jumped out, and Vanessa, hearing the noise, hurled her axe again but missed this time. Sam escaped once more. After rescuing the survivors here, they seek their way back. In conversation with Vanessa, Julius also learned that it was Sam who had killed his own mother. He swore to take Sam down. At this moment, the alarm bells in the camp suddenly rang. When Vanessa and the others returned, the camp owner's badge was bloodied, and the people on the ground had disappeared. They went down to the basement and found only a half-alive man who cried and said that the killer was too fast and he couldn't protect the children. Vanessa realized that it must have been Sam who followed their footprints and arrived here before them. The group discussed strengthening their defenses. Vanessa decided to go out alone to completely resolve the issue with Sam, but vengeance-driven Julius also expressed a desire to go. However, Vanessa stopped him, stating that the people here needed his help more. Once outside, the timid boy, tormented by Sam to the point of death, also expressed his willingness to help. Vanessa slit his arm and began drinking his blood to enhance her sensory abilities. Elsewhere, the salaryman woke up from a nightmare. They had already delayed too much time searching for Vanessa, and now they had only found cooking oil, not gasoline. But a rebel girl named Lucky told them she had a way to convert cooking oil into gasoline. After saying this, she kissed the salaryman, completely disregarding the hormone feelings of Muhammad. Soon, Lucky had filtered several barrels of gasoline. The salaryman was amazed by her, and even with such a great height difference, he didn't see it as a barrier between them and kissed her using his long tongue. Simultaneously, Doc also woke up from a nightmare. She picked up a pen and drew the dream. Axel took a look and recognized the place. It was the naval base. Their simultaneous dream meant something else for Vanessa. Back to Vanessa. After drinking human blood to enhance her sensory abilities, she was chasing a deranged vampire. Along the way, she found a nose-picking finger that looked like Sam had deliberately left behind. Soon, Vanessa followed the trail to a church. She entered cautiously, turned around on instinct, and shot behind her. Sam jumped down and knocked her gun away. They then exchanged deadly punches rather than kisses, but Vanessa was slightly outmatched even with her hand axe. In the end, they compared their pain. Immortal Vanessa showed no weakness. Just as she was about to turn the tables on Sam, he pulled out a dagger and stabbed at her. Vanessa was struck several times by the hard dagger, collapsed but managed to stay conscious, believing that Sam's dagger was too hard on her. Just as Sam was choking her against a pillar, a gunshot sounded from behind. It was Julius who had arrived and fired several shots at Sam to flex his shooting skill, but he missed all. Sam then told Julius how he had played hormone yoga with his mother before brutally killing her. Enraged beyond control, Julius aimed to shoot again, but he found his gun empty. Sam seized the opportunity to grab Julius. At this time, Vanessa had recovered from her injuries and thrust the dagger into Sam's body. Sam turned and fled to the rooftop, with Vanessa and Julius close behind. With nowhere to escape, Sam laughed maniacally and jumped off the loft to collect nose-picking fingers in hell. Watching Sam's body, both of them sighed in relief. The maniac was finally dead. On the other side, the vampire king Dmitri had fully recovered. With his annoying wife Rebecca dead, he even had the leisure to read the Bible. Just then, one of his men came in and reported that his sexy mistress is dead as shit. This news infuriated him, and he urgently needed an army to seek revenge. Hence, he made his way to Julius's territory and informed them that their leader Julius had become human and had completely abandoned them. One of the underlings tried to argue using his tongue, but Dmitri immediately tore off his neck but spared his tongue. The remaining vampires were all shocked to wet their vampire pants, and after uttering reluctant cries, they could only submit to Dmitri. When Vanessa and Julius arrived, they discovered that Sam's body had mysteriously disappeared. Only the dagger remained. Logically, falling from such a height should have been fatal. Julius suggested that Vanessa continue the pursuit. However, at that moment, Vanessa suddenly saw a vision in her eyes. She knew she had to do something that had been troubling her for a long time. Julius mentioned a red door and revealed that it had also appeared in his dreams for a long time. In the distant naval base, on a large red door, were the words saying "No entry." It seems that something big was hidden inside. The scene shifts to Vanessa in a red surroundings with horrifying vampires murmuring to her, causing her to awaken from a nightmare again. She could not understand why she dreamt of those strange images. Determined to uncover the truth, she got up and decided to leave immediately, and Julius could only follow reluctantly. She told him that the red door was inside the naval research base. As they hurried on their way, Vanessa felt a premonition. After passing through a small grove, she unexpectedly saw Doc. Even more surprisingly, Axel was still alive but had turned into a vampire. Axel was near his end and begged Vanessa to reverse his condition, but she shook her head. After her daughter's incident, she was no longer willing to recklessly transform those close to her. Suddenly, Axel charged at her, demanding she either reverse his condition or he would bite her using his unbrushed teeth. An emotional Axel was promptly knocked down by a punch from Julius. Vanessa asked Julius to stay and look after them while she went alone to the naval base to find the truth. Meanwhile, Dmitri was also troubled by dreams of a red door, which indicates that he might also have a terrible past memory. He ordered his vampire minions to find the Sisterhood that he had expelled 200 years ago, urging them to join forces against Vanessa. His worry wasn't about Vanessa alone, but about the vampire elder she might awaken. After Axel woke up and learned of Vanessa's whereabouts, he too headed for the naval base. Doc and Julius, left with no choice, went to look for a car. As Julius boasted about his glorious past to Doc, she suddenly tripped over something. Looking down, Julius discovered that the rope tripping Doc was connected to a bomb. If the pin were pulled, they would be blown to ashes. In a panic, Julius frantically searched his bag for any useful tools. However, at that moment, they heard vampire noises nearby. Terrified, Doc reached for a nearby gun, but accidentally pulled the pin. Julius quickly grabbed the bomb and hurled it into the distance. On the other side, Vanessa had reached the naval base. The mysterious figure who had appeared before now stood in front of her. Removing her mask, it was revealed to be a woman named Scarlett, who was Vanessa's twin sister. Both twins were separated from each other at age 5. Scarlett was also a vampire hunter and had been following Vanessa all along. It turns out she was intensely curious whether Vanessa really could revert vampires back to humans. Vanessa gave a non-committal response. Just then, Axel burst out from the side, and Scarlett instantly dealt him a chilling blow. As she was about to strike again, Vanessa quickly intervened to stop her. Scarlett declared that none of the vampires she encountered deserved to live, leading to a tense standoff between the two, with a battle about to erupt. After both had disarmed each other, Vanessa's presence was commanding. She punched a wall so hard that dust fell from it. Picking up a hatchet, she furiously hacked at Scarlett, who was undaunted, blocking the attacks with her arm bracers. Ultimately, Vanessa resorted to using a headbutt, gaining the upper hand in the first round. Scarlett retaliated by drawing a long sword and slashing it across Vanessa's face, but the wound healed visibly fast. When Scarlett managed to stab Vanessa, she didn't give Scarlett a chance to pull out the sword, grabbing it with one hand and choking Scarlett with the other. Realizing her defeat, Scarlett pulled out a grenade as a threat. After their fight, Scarlett no longer insisted on killing Axel. Axel tried to lead them to the red door, but collapsed from exhaustion. After Vanessa took care of him, the two women opened the isolation door and arrived at the red door. To their surprise, entering Vanessa's name as the password opened the door. Inside was a laboratory filled with vampire-human hybrids, considered failures. They continued to explore until they found a room with a functioning computer, unlocked by Vanessa's fingerprint. Staring at the computer, Vanessa suddenly remembered she had been here before. They entered another room, and pulling back the curtains, they recalled their childhood memories. They had grown up here, bred by the military to study the unique traits of the Van Helsing family and vampires. Vanessa also remembered her mother telling her about a key hidden behind a mural. Scarlett, in disbelief, watched as Vanessa retrieved the key, matching her childhood memories perfectly, but struggling to accept the reality. Suddenly, the phone rang outside. Vanessa answered, and the person on the other end claimed to know her and promised explanations, but the lab alarm went off, and the call went silent. They quickly evacuated, planning to take Axel with them, but he had already disappeared. As they headed to the main door, Dmitri and his vampire army blocked their way, leading to a battle for survival. The scene flashes back to Dmitri, who had been captured by vampire hunter Van Helsing, but he was strangely not killed, instead being imprisoned in the naval lab. After being electrocuted, a doctor extracted his spinal fluid for research. Not long after, a mysterious figure appeared. It's Vanessa's mother. Aware that her daughter was also to be experimented upon, she threw Dmitri a key to unlock his chains. Dmitri, though not understanding why Vanessa's mother would release him, unlocked his chains, turning the naval base into a chaotic battlefield. This was why Dmitri had come, because he needed the key in Vanessa's possession. As he commanded, his followers advanced. Despite their elite skills and fast healing, the two sisters couldn't fight their way out alone. They hid in a room, knowing it wouldn't hold for long. Vanessa handed the key to Scarlett for safekeeping, then bit her hand, drawing strength from her blood. Empowered, Vanessa kicked down the door, wielding a hatchet and a hammer, effortlessly defeating the vampires outside. Scarlett followed, stabbing any that Vanessa missed. Just as Vanessa enjoyed her rampage, Scarlett attempted to kill Dmitri, but was choked by him instead. Dmitri demanded Vanessa stop her attack and took the key from Scarlett. As he was distracted, Scarlett drew a sword from her sleeve and cut off Dmitri's hormone-let-go hand, retrieving the key. They quickly escaped, while Dmitri nonchalantly reattached his severed hand. After Vanessa and Scarlett climbed out of the ventilation duct, Axel had already been waiting outside for quite some time. After throwing the grenade, they temporarily trapped Dmitri underground. At this time, a bald vampire sent by Dmitri arrived at the Sisterhood's headquarters to flex his bald head and met the leader of the Sisterhood. After hearing Dmitri's proposal for an alliance, she flung the bald vampire out with a flick of her wrist. Shouting that he couldn't return empty-handed, the bald vampire grabbed a cross. As the leader lifted him up, he stabbed her in the brain with the cross. As he backed away to escape for his bald life, the other female vampires surprisingly knelt before him, hailing him as their new leader. The bald vampire had never imagined that he would one day reach this pinnacle in life. Turning Axel, he was driven to despair because Vanessa wouldn't bite him and could no longer endure the vampire's bloodthirsty desire. Watching his agony, Vanessa finally consented and bit into Axel's neck. After the bite, Axel spat out black blood, meaning he was transforming. While they were initially relieved, Axel suddenly felt unwell and collapsed into unconsciousness. Vanessa rushed him to the car for emergency treatment, worrying that the same fate of her daughter would happen to Axel. Despite using electric shocks and injecting adrenaline, Axel never woke up again, and his life faded away. Doc watched helplessly as Axel died. Overcome with grief, Vanessa pounded on Axel's body, unable to accept this outcome. They brought him to a peaceful place, where Julius found a spot to bury Axel's body. After a final kiss, they buried Axel there. At this point, they had no idea where their next destination would be. Julius learned that the key retrieved by Vanessa was meant to unlock something. He warned everyone that if the vampire elder was resurrected, it would bring disaster to humanity. While they were arguing about what to do, Vanessa seemed to hear something and told everyone to be quiet. She then urged Julius to drive back quickly to where they had buried Axel. Vanessa rushed out of the car and frantically began to dig up the earth covering Axel. Doc and the others initially thought Vanessa was hallucinating, but Scarlett also claimed she could hear a heartbeat. Together, they quickly dug Axel out. He still had a peaceful expression on his face, but the next second he suddenly woke up, looking bewildered at his surroundings. Having been through a brush with death, Axel finally forgave Doc for what she had done to him. On the other side, Mohammed and his group were walking along the riverbank when a figure began to shadow them. They stopped to rest in the woods, where Mohammed's wound began bleeding again. Just as the salaryman threw his blood-stained shirt into the river, gunshots suddenly rang out from behind. By the time he rushed back, Sam had already abducted Mohammed. Unbeknownst to the salaryman, Mohammed was actually not far from there. Elsewhere, Axel stripped off his clothes, planning to bask in the sunshine, but Vanessa hurriedly covered his muscles with her own body. She feared that Axel would vanish under the sun like her own daughter had, though in reality, her daughter was a special case. That evening, Axel kept watch as usual, while Vanessa had another peculiar dream. The people around also awoke, having dreamt of the same scenario. Vanessa knew it was the vampire elder summoning her. Suddenly, a helicopter appeared in the distance. They thought it was a rescue mission, but to their surprise, several gas bombs were hurled their way. A person in COVID mask approached Vanessa and said they had been looking for her for a long time, telling her not to worry because they were here to help, before she passed out. At night, a mysterious military force approached and captured Vanessa for unknown reasons. When Axel and the others woke up the next day, they got in the car intending to mount a rescue. However, the sheriff tailed them in a police car. Upon stopping, he warmly invited them to rest at his cabin. Unable to refuse his hospitality, they followed him but had to surrender their weapons upon entering. After some consideration, Axel and the others agreed, though Scarlett kept a wary eye. The cabin had many rooms and was stocked with weapons and ammunition, which Axel hoped to share, even if just through an exchange, but the sheriff sternly refused any such deal. After freshening up, Scarlett expressed a desire to leave immediately, trusting her instincts that these people were not to be trusted. However, Axel was reluctant to leave so soon, especially with a barbecue planned for the evening. The sheriff joined them for a chat, and Julius commented on how delicious the jerky was, a credit to the butler's skills. Soon it was time for the barbecue, and the sheriff invited them to join. In the end, only Axel and Scarlett agreed to lend a hand, and curious, Axel peeked inside just as a vampire rushed towards him. This vampire was to be their dinner for the evening. After subduing her with several electric shocks, they placed her on a chopping board, nailed her limbs down, and drilled a hole in her head to ensure that gases inside her could escape and prevent any internal explosions. This gruesome scene was an eye-opener for both Axel and Scarlett. Deciding to leave immediately, Axel and Scarlett planned to steal some ammunition while Julius and Doc headed back to the car. Doc was packing up in the car while Julius went down to the basement. He opened the oven door to find the vampire inside, charred but not dead, leaving him with mixed feelings before he finally put her to rest. Suddenly, the sexy butler jumped out from behind, accusing Julius of ruining the taste of the barbecue and threatening to kill him. Julius quickly turned the tables on her, ending her greasy life. Axel and Scarlett had retrieved their equipment and returned to the car, where they waited a long time for Julius to finally show up. Just as they were about to make their escape, the sheriff stood in front of the car and shot out the tires. They were then tied up. The sheriff couldn't understand why they had killed the sexy butler without hormone mercy. After some questioning, Julius confessed that he used to be a vampire himself. He couldn't stand to watch their cruel methods of consumption any longer. Doc also revealed to them that everyone present had once been vampires. At this, the sheriff and his people seemed to have stumbled upon a new world, curious about what the taste of a vampire-turned-human might be like. These four were about to be brutally killed for being humans reverted from vampires. The sheriff wanted to test if they were lying. If they died from hanging, they were human. If not, they would be eaten. Just as Scarlett was about to be pushed, a vampire's call suddenly came from a distance. Battle-hardened Scarlett knew it was the vampire Sisterhood arriving. An officer confidently stated they'd be safe on the top floor, only to be struck through the heart with an arrow the next moment. The sound drew nearer, and a Sisterhood vampire appeared downstairs. The sheriff, seeing only one opponent, arrogantly went down to face her alone, but soon 2 more Sisterhood members emerged. The sheriff's attempt to flee was too late. The leader bit him directly while the other 2 fired shots to no effect. Meanwhile, Scarlett managed to untie herself, knock out the guard, and reach the armory. They grabbed the weapons and prepared to escape, but the Sisterhood had already blocked the main door. The now awake guard told them about a back door just as the vampires were about to break in, and they had no choice but to follow him to it. Once outside, Scarlett handed the keys to Julius for safekeeping, and she and Axel took another path. She cut her arm to leave a trail of blood to distract the Sisterhood vampires, while Julius and Doc followed the guard down another route. Suddenly, a vampire attacked, knocking down the guard, but Julius kicked his smelly butt away. It turned out to be the infected sheriff, whom Julius then beat to death. The guard had also been bitten, and Doc pulled the trigger without hesitation. On Axel's side, the Sisterhood quickly caught up. Axel fired at them repeatedly, but to no avail. Scarlett informed Axel that the women were bulletproof. Just then, the female leader threw a large knife that luckily hit a Rubbermaid gun. Axel and Scarlett were forced to retreat to a cemetery, where the Sisterhood vampires did not follow, respecting the sacredness of the place. This gave the 2 a chance to catch their breath and hastily leave the area. After running for a long time, exhausted, Axel spotted an armored car nearby. They got into the car to rest, and during their conversation, they shared stories of their past, quickly strengthening their bond. They couldn't help but perform a hormone yoga session all night in the cash-filled van, unaware that the Sisterhood had silently tracked them down by their hormone smell. As soon as Scarlett rolled down her car window, a ghostly, pale face appeared outside, giving her quite the fright. She quickly regained her composure from her yoga session. Axel opened the other side of the window, and another face appeared there too. The Sisterhood vampires had surrounded the car. The leader kept banging on the car body, annoying Scarlett inside to no end. They were stuck in an awkward situation. The people inside couldn't get out, and those outside couldn't get in. Moreover, they had no food to sustain them. Suddenly, smoke began to fill the car. It turned out that the leader outside had started burning money to smoke them out. Left with no choice, Axel and Scarlett were forced to confront their assailants. Axel had made a suit of body armor worth $1 billion, while Scarlett took on 2 vampires. Thanks to her years of training, she managed to hold her own. Axel, armed only with a small dagger, was not so optimistic. Impressed by Scarlett's prowess, the leader sincerely invited her to join the Sisterhood. However, since there was no salary offered, Scarlett immediately refused. Just then, Axel managed to draw first blood. But when Scarlett was momentarily distracted, a vampire managed to ambush her. As the leader was reveling in her triumph, Scarlett's wound quickly healed, and the vampire that bit her spat out black blood, reverting back to human. Seeing her transformed comrade, the leader furiously slit her throat. With 2 comrades down, the leader had no choice but to make a hasty retreat. Meanwhile, in the woods, Julius and his companions suddenly heard a familiar roar. It was his former subordinate catching up to them. Julius tried to exert his domineering presence, but in the next second, he was knocked to the ground by the bald vampire sent by Dmitri. Dmitri lifted Julius and demanded the keys. However, Julius responded with a middle finger, infuriating Dmitri, who then threw him far away into a tree, knocking him unconscious. Dmitri managed to retrieve the keys from Julius, and his next task was to free the vampire elder using the keys. Eventually, Dmitri let Doc go to inform Vanessa that he would be waiting at the cave where the vampire elder was imprisoned. Turning to Vanessa, he was jolted awake from a nightmare. She found herself in an unfamiliar room. Seizing the opportunity when an old lady came to bring her food, she rushed out and discovered that many vampires were being held captive for research in the mysterious lab. She wondered what kind of place this was. When a few patrol staff walked by, Vanessa quickly dealt with them. She then encountered a doctor at a corner who claimed he was in charge. Without hesitation, she knocked him out and pushed through the doors into the main hall, incredulous at finding herself deep in the snowy mountains. The old lady entered again with food, telling Vanessa that they had been searching for her for a long time because her blood was key to saving the world. After calming down, she could talk to the lead doctor. Soon, Vanessa appeared behind the lead doctor in his office. He revealed that he had been hired by the government to find a cure for vampirism before the unrest started. His father had also worked at a naval research base. Seeing his face, Vanessa suddenly had a flashback, feeling she had met him as a child but couldn't remember clearly. The lead doctor then took Vanessa outside to the lab where a man had been turned into a vampire after being injected with an experimental serum. He hoped Vanessa could help revert him using his blood samples from different times to find a cure. However, Vanessa didn't trust him and returned to her room. A voice next door suddenly warned her not to trust anyone there as there were many secrets. Unable to sleep, she went to the lead doctor's office and found a vampire diary. When she was watching it, the old lady came to tell Vanessa that her mother had been infected with the vampire virus during an experiment. At that time, she was pregnant with Vanessa and her twin sister Scarlett. When the military learned of the sisters' special traits, their mother had to flee with them. When Vanessa inquired about her mother's current status, the old lady hesitated. Curious about how the old lady knew about her mother, Vanessa saw that the initials in the book matched the old lady's name. Instinctively, Vanessa believed she was her mother, and the lady did not deny it. Overjoyed, the lady broke into tears like an old baby when Vanessa told her that her sister Scarlett was still alive. She suggested immediately calling someone to bring her back, but Vanessa asked her mother not to hurry. At the same time, she agreed to help the lead doctor complete the experiment. They arrived at the lab together. While a nurse was injecting medicine, the vampire on the bed suddenly lost control and brutally killed her. Vanessa bit into the vampire's arm, and the vampire vomited black blood, reverting to a human. He then thanked Vanessa for her actions. At that moment, the old lady seemed to be arguing with the lead doctor. Vanessa quickly stepped forward to inquire. It turned out the lead doctor wanted Vanessa to release the vampire elder because her blood lacked the substance he needed. Vanessa also told the old lady that she and Scarlett had been summoned by the vampire elder, experiencing the same dreams. Vanessa wanted to kill the vampire elder to end the chaos, but the old lady cautioned that the vampire elder was very powerful and they needed to plan carefully. She warned Vanessa not to let the lead doctor know about her dreams. During her second visit to the lead doctor's office, Vanessa had seen many research reports and Dimitri's study records. A photo on the desk caught her attention. Looking closely at the man in the photo through a magnifying glass, Vanessa remembered that the lead doctor was the doctor she had met as a child. Just then, the lead doctor entered, and Vanessa quickly subdued him, demanding to know why he hadn't aged in 30 years. It turned out, instead of researching vampire virus vaccines, the doctor had been researching how to extract vampire longevity genes to achieve eternal youth for himself. However, his research was incomplete, and he needed the blood gene from the vampire elder. Moreover, he was modifying vampires here, attempting to create a new type of vampire. After learning the truth, Vanessa knocked him out and went to find her mother, planning to leave with her. Vanessa asked her about the person locked in the next room, but the old lady didn't know. Vanessa smashed the door with an axe, but the room was empty except for a tape recorder. Vanessa then realized she had been caught in the lead doctor's plot from the start. Alarms were sounding outside. Vanessa and her mother dodged left and right, but there was no way out. Vanessa smashed the switch with her axe, releasing the vampires who attacked the guards like blood bags. Vanessa and the old lady escaped in the chaos. They reached the lobby, where Vanessa wanted to smash the glass and jump out, but the old lady suddenly urged her to release the vampire elder, saying she didn't want to leave either. Doubtful, Vanessa questioned whether the old lady was really her mother, asking about the location of a hidden key from her childhood. The old lady couldn't answer, only knowing it was in the lab. Vanessa immediately realized this old lady was not her mother, as her real mother would never forget. Everything was a lie. Exposed, the old lady no longer hid her true intentions, pulling out a gun and ruthlessly killing Vanessa without hesitation, since she was no longer useful. They could still go find Scarlet to release the vampire elder. Elsewhere, the deranged killer Sam was on the hunt again, tracking down a girl with a sinister enjoyment evident in his pursuit. As the girl desperately ran forward, reaching a tree, she picked up a stone to defend herself, unaware that Sam had already appeared behind and captured her. Just yesterday, Sam had brought an injured Mohammed back to his home. He waited for Mohammed to regain consciousness, intending to turn him into a vampire. However, Mohammed revealed that he had once been bitten by Vanessa, a bite that could turn him back into a human, prompting Sam to abandon his plan. Now, Mohammed was on the brink of death, urging Sam to fetch a doctor to save him. In a basement, Sam had thrown 2 rabbits among the people, who desperately fought over them and ate them raw. In a corner, someone reached out for a rabbit but was caught by Sam. After a struggle, she was subdued by Sam and brought to take care of Mohammed. She was a brave girl and stitched up Mohammed's wounds after a brutal treatment. Outside, Sam heard Mohammed's screams and found himself shouting as well. At that moment, he was suddenly reminded of his unhappy past, finding solace only in singing nursery rhymes. Sam, carrying a bucket, approached his slaughterhouse, his regular spot for his blood coffee. Flashing back several years when Mohammed had just found his favorite t-shirt, he saw someone inspecting a car trunk while a vampire charged at him. Mohammed hurried to warn the person, who turned out to be Sam. This was their first meeting. That evening, Mohammed found Sam attempting to hang himself and rushed to save him, learning then that Sam was deaf and mute. Coincidentally, Mohammed's grandmother was also deaf and mute, so he knew sign language, which delighted the otherwise isolated Sam. They became friends since then, giving Sam a new reason to live. But not everything was really as it seemed, and Mohammed was unaware that Sam's original intention was to kill him. Back to the present, Sam tied up his own father, placing a basin below him before slicing open his arm to let the blood drip out, enjoying his gruesome version of breakfast. From a young age, he had been abused by his father, which led him to develop a penchant for killing animals. His father, far from guiding him, only beat him more until, unable to endure it any longer, Sam picked up a knife and blinded his father. Enraged, his father struck him hard on the ears, resulting in Sam's deafness. Thus, a deranged killer was nurtured. Recalling his unhappy past, Sam killed his father with an iron rod. He then entered Mohammed's room where the girl was busy on the floor. When Sam inquired about her actions, Mohammed suddenly strangled Sam from behind. The girl grabbed the rod and stabbed Sam in the heart. However, the rope in Mohammed's hands turned out to be of poor quality, allowing Sam to escape. As Sam was about to kill the girl, Mohammed pleaded for her life, telling Sam to come at him instead. After a moment's thought, Sam surprisingly let the girl go. He then told Mohammed to lie back down and tenderly covered him with a blanket. However, the hunting moment had officially begun. Sam was extremely happy, continuously jumping in the mud and following the scent. Meanwhile, Mohammed endured the pain from his wounds and kept knocking on the wooden planks. After much effort, he successfully smashed a hole through. By the time he emerged, the girl had already been tied up by Sam. Mohammed pleaded with Sam to spare her life, to repay his favor of having Sam's life years ago. But Sam shook his head, saying things weren't as Mohammed thought. He told Mohammed that it was actually he who had spared his life back then. Then he kicked Mohammed away and began to drink the girl's blood. Mohammed ran forward, grabbed Sam's scissors, and plunged them straight into the girl's chest. The girl didn't blame Mohammed. After all, this was her release. Mohammed also knew that he could never escape Sam's clutches, so he chose to end his own life. Watching Mohammed die, Vampire Sam completely broke down. Eventually, he bit Mohammed, but there was no improvement in his condition. Sam carried Mohammed to the church, pulled out the scissors, and cut off his own nose-picking finger, hanging it on his chest. After that, he prepared himself for hanging, kicked away the platform, and quietly awaited the end of his life. Suddenly, at that moment, Mohammed's finger twitched. He was resurrected, yet he died, for Mohammed had turned into a vampire. He looked at the hanging Sam, wondering whether to save him. The scene shifts to a vampire prying at a car door, likely looking for delicious food inside. Just then, a mysterious blonde woman approached with her long sword, deftly knocking the vampire over and opening the car door. Inside was Doc holding a map. It was already late, and the blonde woman planned to take her back to the camp. Along the way, they also discovered a corpse, strangely dismembered with traps set around it. Fortunately, the blonde woman saved Doc's life. At that moment, sounds of vampires came from the surrounding woods, forcing the two to retreat. They returned near the safe house where Axel and Scarlett had already arrived. At that time, Doc, suffering from altitude sickness, was unable to breathe normally. After taking some oxygen, Axel asked Doc why Julius wasn't with her. Upon learning of Julius's death, Axel suspected whether Doc had again abandoned her teammate, as she had done more than once before. Facing Axel's disdain, Doc started packing, planning to leave right then. But a station member stopped her. It was night, and no one could go out. Until tomorrow, everyone here must leave, as they did not want to harbor strangers, and there wasn't enough food to go around. Elsewhere, the salaryman and Lucky also came to a crossroads. They were looking for a waterfall, but the sign at the junction had disappeared. At that moment, the bushes nearby suddenly rustled. It was the little girl walking out with balloons, and she also had a map in her hand. Back to the safe house, the blonde woman activated the electric fence to prevent vampires from sneaking in at night. Suddenly, the dog started barking loudly at something outside, and gunshots were also heard. They ran to the rooftop, and Axel saw the people outside. It was the salaryman and others with vampires chasing them. He quickly opened the door to rescue them. After they were all brought into the safe house, the dog suddenly ran out, and the station member chased after the dog, wanting to save it, unaware that a trap was already waiting for him ahead. The blonde woman and her companions kept watch outside. Suddenly, Axel signaled them to look not far away. The station member, who had chased after the dog, had turned into a vampire and was now walking back towards them. As they debated who should deal with the station member, Scarlett took the initiative and shot him in the head. They brought the body back and began discussing why modern vampires seem to have become smarter. They were using traps and no longer feared sunlight, which puzzled everyone. The key to solving this mystery lay in dissecting the body. The blonde woman sliced the body for examination, with Doc assisting. After extracting the blood, they observed under the microscope that his cells were continuously dividing and evolving. While they were still discussing what this meant, the power suddenly went out. Everyone went outside to check, suspecting that the power supply had been sabotaged. Moreover, vampires had already reached the windows. They ran to the rooftop, and after firing a flare, they were shocked to see that the vampires were using iron rods to pry open doors. After repelling the vampires, they decided that the blonde woman would handle restoring the power, while Axel and Scarlett would distract the vampires outside. After the salaryman fired the flare, Axel and Scarlett went outside, and the blonde woman reached the generator room. The outer door hadn't been breached, indicating the vampires must have tunneled their way in. Suddenly, Axel turned around to find a vampire right behind Scarlett. The blonde woman managed to restore the power just in time, and they quickly regrouped and entered the safe house, closing the electric gate behind them. One vampire tried to follow them in, but was electrocuted instantly. They spent the night safely. The next day, Doc and the blonde woman continued to study the blood samples. They were surprised to find that the man's cells hadn't lost their activity. They suspected that these might be genetically modified cells, now possessing a certain level of intelligence. After puncturing the cell membrane, the cells autonomously began to repair themselves. This indicated that even with fatal injuries, they could be difficult to kill. The only solution was to find the original sample. Doc immediately mentioned to the blonde woman the unique abilities of Vanessa. In a morgue, a hand from a body bag began to move on its own, frightening a dog so much that it ran away. A woman was tidying up the room when, shockingly, the corpse that had been lying on the bed stood up and casually walked outside. The salaryman heard the noise and came rushing over. They couldn't believe that a person who had been shot in the head could still stand up, so they followed him to check it out. To their astonishment, they found that the revived man could now withstand the sunlight. Lucky immediately shot him in the head, but his wound healed rapidly. Realizing something was amiss, they wanted to go back and inform the blonde woman, but they were already surrounded by vampires. At this moment, the scar-faced vampire came out and asked the salaryman why modern humans were immune to vampire infections. The salaryman was also curious about why he could withstand sunlight. Lucky, not bothering with dialogue, promptly fired a barrage of bullets. Meanwhile, the people inside the safe house heard the noise, but the main door had been locked from the outside. They had no choice but to head to the rooftop. By then, Lucky had run out of bullets. Just as she turned around, the scar-faced vampire grabbed her sexy body and bit her. But he was not in a hurry to kill the salaryman because he wanted to observe whether Lucky would turn into a vampire. The salaryman held Lucky, comforting her that they could reverse the situation if they found Vanessa. However, Lucky didn't accept this because she was pregnant with the salaryman's child and was uncertain about what the child would become if she turned into a vampire. So she decided on a mutual destruction, pushing the salaryman away, hoping he could survive. But the surrounding vampires had already encircled the salaryman. In their gaze, the bomb was then detonated. Later, the severely injured Julius was rescued. He told Axel that Doc had not abandoned him. She had done her best. Only then did Axel realize that he had wrongly blamed Doc. Moreover, the key had already been stolen by Dimitri. At that moment, the blonde woman came out asking about the key. Julius told her that the key was retrieved by Vanessa and Scarlett from the naval test base after much hardship. After hearing this, she gave Scarlett a puzzled look and called her out. Outside, Axel had just buried the salaryman and the other person. A man came over and told him that the blonde woman had taken Scarlett to accomplish a task only they could handle, leaving Axel utterly perplexed. Meanwhile, as Doc was looking for the little girl, she happened to see her using a radio to communicate with someone else. Initially, Doc thought she was merely playing around and didn't think much of it. However, when the little girl turned on the speaker, a voice came through saying they were approaching her location and asking her not to leave. Alarmed, Doc quickly asked the little girl who she had contacted. Just then, they heard the sound of a helicopter overhead. Axel, recognizing the sound, realized it must be the same forces that had abducted Vanessa earlier coming back to this location. Elsewhere, the blonde woman was leading Scarlett through the mountains. When Scarlett inquired about their destination, the blonde woman revealed that they were searching for the vampire elder to prevent Dimitri from releasing him. Scarlett, however, had no idea where the elder was imprisoned. The blonde woman told her that she had always known and he's in her dreams. When asked how she could know about Scarlett's dreams, the blonde woman explained, "It's her who has been telling Scarlett and Vanessa all this information." It seems that this blonde woman is someone special to the twin sisters. The scene shifts to the leader of the vampire Sisterhood, bringing a strange vampire to Dimitri and demanding Dimitri to kneel before the strange vampire. Dimitri, observing her limping, was highly skeptical about whether the strange vampire might faint next. However, before he could react, his life was effortlessly taken control. At that moment, he understood that the strange vampire was not someone to be trifled with. She was a divine messenger of the vampire elder. She would guide Dimitri to the location imprisoning the vampire elder. Gently, she placed a key in Dimitri's hand, which immediately felt as if it were burning. This mark was the key to finding the elder. However, only 3 people could go on this mission. The rest had to stay behind. While Dimitri was still worried about his men's food and drink needs, the divine messenger quickly told him those were not his concerns. After a swift and ruthless display of her skills, she spared none of her own people, concluding with a smooth and deadly technique. Meanwhile, the blonde woman and Scarlett had reached the foot of the mountain. Shockingly, she revealed herself to be the long-lost mother of Vanessa and Scarlett. As she caressed a pendant on her neck, she told Scarlett it contained the blood of the Lord of Darkness, passed down from her own mother. When she was little, after her mother gave her the blood, she tried to kill her with an axe, but she easily dodged it thanks to the blood, which seemed to possess a special magic. The mother explained that the unique aspect of Scarlett and her sister might just be due to this blood. After saying this, she tried to pass the vial of blood to Scarlett, but Scarlett saw it as an ominous object and refused to accept it. At that moment, she could no longer sense Vanessa's presence. Guided by the glowing light in their hands, Dimitri and his 2 companions were the first to find the secret chamber. After inserting the key, they all entered, but they hadn't gone far when the 2 beside him vanished mysteriously. Dimitri, looking at the glowing brand in his hand, was not worried about himself at all. At the same time, the mother and daughter also arrived at the cave's entrance and saw the key already in the door. They immediately went inside. The mother told Scarlett that the path to the vampire elder's prison was full of trials, and being first didn't guarantee finding the elder's chamber first. They proceeded with caution. As they talked, a little girl suddenly ran past them. It was a vision of Scarlett and Vanessa as children. Back then, the lead doctor tried to hug the little Vanessa, but was promptly pushed down by her, giving him a taste of her strength. It was then that he recognized the sisters' uniqueness. By this time, the group who had entered the chamber began to experience hallucinations. The bald minion was trembling with fear. It turns out back when he was still human, he was bullied by others daily, too timid even to acknowledge his own name. Even when water was poured on his head, he could only endure in silence due to his severe claustrophobia. Turning to Dimitri's past, he had peculiar inclinations and a severe masochistic streak. Whipping, dripping wax, spiked clubs, none could satisfy his desires. Moreover, he harbored evil thoughts about his biological sister, which only deepened his inner turmoil. Eventually, his assistant summoned the vampire elder, turning him into a vampire and hoping to control his sickness. Meanwhile, the leader of the vampire Sisterhood was being tied to a stake by two church members who dealt with non-believers by burning them alive. Dimitri watched as she screamed in a chicken voice and immediately rescued her, pulling his bald minion out of the illusion as well. After passing through a tunnel, Scarlet and her mother arrived at a stone door. Behind them, Dimitri and his two companions appeared. Dimitri expressed his regret that Vanessa was not there and causally ordered his bald minion to kill them first. Scarlet faced the Sisterhood leader while her mother took on the bald minion. Watching them fight skillfully, Dimitri refrained from intervening. Just as the Sisterhood leader was about to be defeated, the bald minion saved her at the crucial moment. At that point, Dimitri captured Scarlet and commanded her mother to open the stone door. It turned out that only the blood of the Van Helsing family could open the door, and the price was their own life. For the safety of Scarlet, the mother had no choice but to open the door. She placed her hand in the groove on the door, and immediately 2 daggers pierced through her. As her blood flowed, the door slowly opened, and the dust on the vampire elder began to fall off. Dimitri approached excitedly, urging the elder to drink Scarlet's blood to regain his strength. The elder flexed his odd figure but sensed the presence of the Dark Lord on her, a royal aura that made him hesitant to approach. Dimitri suggested he drink from Scarlet's mother instead, as she was already bleeding and close to death. As the vampire elder moved towards the mother, Scarlet, with a furious roar, ordered him to stop. Everyone was baffled. At that moment, the mother revealed they are the master of the vampire elder. It turns out, when the elder was imprisoned by the Van Helsing family, he faced a choice: loyalty or death. It was clear now, he had chosen loyalty to the Van Helsing family. Now, to confirm his sincerity, Scarlet ordered him to kill Dimitri. Dimitri was dumbfounded, realizing that all his efforts had led to this moment where he was merely delivered to his death. The vampire elder, caressing Dimitri's head, ultimately crushed him. Though he did not wish to kill him, he had to follow his master's orders. Scarlet then sent the elder to find her sister Vanessa, but since she had already died from a gunshot, the elder could no longer sense her presence. Scarlet, cutting her own arm, thrust the blood-stained dagger into the elder. Empowered by the blood of the Dark Lord, the elder quickly located Vanessa. Before the mother died, she asked Scarlet to take the blood from her neck. Scarlet wanted to ask why, but it was too late. Even her potentially healing blood couldn't save her mother now. Elsewhere, at the lead doctor's laboratory base, the place was in complete disarray with no survivors, only bodies of the slain everywhere. The vampire elder found Vanessa quietly lying on a hospital bed, alive or dead unknown. The elder bit into Vanessa's neck, and she immediately woke up, her eyes turning red. With that, Season 2 of this drama concludes.